Larian Studios have been making Divinity games for 16 years, but despite their creativity with every single title, remember how you could transform into a dragon in Divinity 2? Their previous projects always felt somewhat rough and clunky and never got enough attention. Everything changed with the crowdfunded Original Sin, a game that won numerous awards and finally brought the studio the recognition they worked for so many years. Unfortunately, despite liking the series, I couldn't find myself enjoying that game after several attempts to play it due to poor writing, a lot of rather poor balancing, the quality of life decisions, and my overall dislike of turn-based combat. So I didn't expect that Original Sin 2 would be much different. I was very wrong.
That rainbow's beautiful. I wonder where it leads.
Somewhere better than here, maybe.
All of the good stuff from the Original Sin that I liked about it is still there, with the most notable element being how environmental effects transform your thinking about solving problems. In a fight, instead of shooting an arrow or getting close and personal, you can instead throw a barrel of poisonous goo into a group of enemies, then light it on fire for an explosive effect, then douse out of flames with water or blood, and then shock it and everyone standing in it. Even apart from this, the game is simply full of possibilities and systems that you can use for your benefit, or miscalculate and witness some unexpected results. This world is full of life and concepts that Ultima series were famous for back in the day, with a modernized twist on it. And more importantly, all of this is introduced very carefully to never overwhelm the player with the possibilities. With the same approach taken for the genuinely exciting exploration, story, characters, and some of the mechanics in the game, it is very clever in guiding the player without ever feeling restrictive, which leads to a game that simply feels thought out. Due to the mentioned dislike of the turn-based combat, I did play on Explorer difficulty, which is easier than the default Classic difficulty, but it seemed that overall the game was simply more smart about enemy placement and overall balance. And it might also be the first Larian game to have a really good story and really good characters, both in main cast and some of the secondary characters. There's still undeniable quirkiness to Rivellon and its inhabitants, something comedic to it, but this time around it's not handled improperly and doesn't lead to a story or game world that you just don't care about. It simply gives this world a special flavor. And a special mention also goes to the soundtrack of the game. As the first project in the series since the passing of Kirill Pokrovsky, whose music was always the highlight of the Divinity games, it certainly didn't disappoint and has some amazing tunes reminiscent of older games, yet having something of a style of its own. With how much the game tries to do, it's no surprise that even after all the patches and tweaks, some parts of the game still might break a bit if you do something completely unexpected. There aren't many bugs or issues of note that I could find, but I had some seemingly unrelated things to happen or some strange reactions from NPCs. Also, despite being ways better than what Ultima had back in the day in terms of the UI and the UX, there are still some minor frustrations about managing the inventory or fighting things that you might need, which in a game with so many interactive elements and things that you can pick up can become a bit of a nightmare unless you start planning and sorting things out from the start. Oh, and the more you know about Rivellon, the more confusing the story and the character actions will be. I found myself confused about the time period placement of the game while playing it, and after checking some additional materials for help, I got even more confused, so it's better to just treat the game as a standalone story.
And what was once laughter is now an anguished scream. He returns to himself. The screaming stops.
What's also best to do is to prepare that the game closing chapters are horrible. The majority of the game is spent on genuinely exciting exploration, fun quests, interesting fights, and engaging storyline, but when the storyline is getting to its logical conclusion, the game decides to throw in another 15-hour stretch of, well, what's best described as content. As it not only doesn't fit the pacing of the game, it feels completely unnecessary, it also features all of the worst fights with bad gimmicks to them and a progressively more confused and lackluster story. It also highlights just how bad a lot of AI can be, especially when involving the friendly or neutral NPCs, as they can bravely run to fistfight gigantic monsters on a field that's burning with a cursed fire. And no matter how inventive your attempts to break the game logics to save them is, it is highly likely that they will manage to kill themselves nonetheless.
Out of my way, two legs, it's mating season, I've got places to be. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy.
While the terrible and disappointing ending parts do last much longer than they should have, they still make up for, at best, a quarter of the whole game, and the fact that the rest of the game is so amazing, so exciting, and so well made is what makes it sting so much. But at the end of the day, those great hours with the game outweigh the bad ones, and I expect that some people might not even get annoyed at the closing hours as much as I did, and will have a lot of fun with cooperative and other multiplayer modes that I didn't even play. So Divinity Original Sin 2 is the best Divinity game as of today, and it's also one of the best, most inventive and fun RPGs I've played in recent years, which makes me quite excited about seeing what the future might hold for Rivellon.
Be grateful that you don't feel the need.